Well, my name's Scott Tornquist. I've been in Mason City here since the fall of 1993, about 20 years now. My wife and I feel very blessed to have had the opportunity to come to Mason City. And when we came here, our youngest son was 5 months old. We had just started our family. I had grown up in Des Moines, she in Ohio. We had been out of the Midwest for some time. And when we had the opportunity to come to Mason City, it was like coming home for me, and in a lot of respects for her too. And we were only here a short time, year and a half, 2 years, and we decided this was the community that we wanted to put our roots down in. This is where we wanted to raise our family. Our second son was born here, and just a couple months ago he went off to college. And so we truly did raise our family here in Mason City. We feel very blessed to have done so. And my wife and I are the type of people that don't just want to be takers. We want to be givers, and we're very appreciative of the opportunities that the community has offered me and my family, and so this is one of the ways that I can give back. I think I've got the skill set that makes me a good council person. I'd like to think that I've proven that over the last 8 years, the last 2 terms that I've served. So in a nutshell, I've still got the passion, I've got the energy, and I've got the experience that I think is beneficial to moving the community forward.
When you take a look at sit back and assess the direction that the city has taken, the city is going, how would you describe that? And what do you see as far as the direction is concerned for the city?
I guess the best way I can describe that is just the sense of peace that I have. I find myself to be in a state of peace that I've never experienced since I've been on the council, and that's really refreshing. Now, the peace that I feel should not be confused with a lack of passion or desire to continue. There's still plenty of work to be done. However, if you think back to when I joined the council, and the first 4 years were really very difficult, and the reasons I joined in the first place was because as a citizen in the community, I was less than appreciative of the way Mason City was being represented outside the community. I didn't like the way people were talking about Mason City, and I felt like we were missing a lot of opportunities. And it took 4 years of gutting it out to get to a point where we had some new people run. And quite honestly, if you've watched Mason City politics very closely, in a lot of respects, the very best we could do 4 years ago was get to a point where we could at least be deadlocked, which in a lot of respects was a step forward. It's hard to look at it that way, but it's been a process. And from that and 2 very difficult years that followed, we got to a point 2 years ago where we got 3 new council persons that have just meant a world of difference. And the best way I could describe it is we have a team now. I have a group of colleagues that I hold in very high regard. That isn't meant to say that we agree on everything, and in fact, many times we don't. However, we're able to disagree with civil discourse, which is something that's been lacking in the past. And to a person, I respect my colleagues, and I appreciate what we've been able to do the last couple years in working together. I think one of the most telling points of the way we've been able to work together as a team is in the team that we've got in place now. It's October 10, 20, we've been in place for 22 months. And in that 22 months, we've executed 11 development agreements. Now that's a conservative number because it does not count 2 development agreements that didn't have incentives with them, and it doesn't count 2 development agreements that are in the pipeline. So a conservative number, 11 development agreements, opportunities that create jobs and grow the tax base. You have to go back 9 years to add up all the development agreements that happened over that period of time to get to 11. That is to say, in 9 years previous to the last 22 months, we executed the same number of development agreements that we've executed in the last 22 months. I think that's huge. I think it means that the business community, both inside and outside the community, have a level of confidence in Mason City and the leadership and the direction that we're going. And Mason City is open for business. That benefits every citizen in the community. When we can grow our tax base, it puts us in a position to be able to, one, maintain status quo in terms of services, and two, add amenities without necessarily being in a position where we have to increase taxes to be able to do so. So it all works together. It's pretty significant.
I think you just answered our third question without realizing we were going to ask what the importance of the city is in that of providing jobs for citizens. I think, unless Mr. Toma differs with me, you
might I add one thought to that?
Definitely, yes, please.
You know, one of the things that we being the council, hear a lot from the citizens in the community is the need to add jobs. We need more jobs, we need good paying jobs. What people need to understand, city government, the city council, city staff, we can't create jobs unless we're adding jobs to city government. We can't make any business stay in the community. We can't make any business come to Mason City. Those are all driven by the private sector. The only thing that we can do as a council and as leadership in the community is create a tone that's conducive to existing businesses wanting to grow and new businesses wanting to come. And I think the success that we've had in the number of development agreements that we've been able to generate in the last 22 months is part and parcel to the change in culture that we've had at the council table, which I believe has resulted directly in a change in tone in the community.
In the providing of incentives in the packages, are they all pretty much the same? Do you favor a standard one, or you like to tailor them individually?
No, just as I think we need general guidelines to work within, so that for the most part we can try to keep businesses of like industry similar. However, each and every project is unique. They all bring their own unique set of circumstances, and so I believe it behooves us to be nimble, and we do that by being flexible in terms of what it takes to put a development agreement together. We have been very blessed in the last year and a half with a new development director at City Hall, and he's a very creative gentleman, and he brings life experiences to Mason City from outside the community, which is important. And he's done a very good job of offering up new ideas, new suggestions, creative ways that we can work with each and every business to try to make something happen.
The city contributes more than $100,000 a year to the North Iowa Corridor Economic Development Corporation. I trust you think from your comments before that that's a good investment, and should the city continue its partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, and if so, how?
You said Chamber of Commerce. Are we talking about the Chamber of Commerce?
First the corridor and then the Chamber.
Okay.
Two distinct groups, of course.
Okay. With respect to the North Iowa Corridor, I commonly refer to them as the EDC, so if I do that, it's just old habit. Yes, I think the $100,000 is a very good investment, and yes, without question, I think we should continue. And in fact, if you think back to 2 years ago, that's one of the commitments that we put in place with the old council, a council that we quite often didn't agree on a lot of things, but that is one thing that we agreed on. The reason I think that that's a good investment is twofold. The city of Mason City has to have an economic development function. That's a foregone conclusion. So there's two ways of doing that. We either do that in-house, or we do it with a partner like the North Iowa Corridor. Now, if we were to do it in-house, I am certain that it would cost us more than $100,000 by the time we put the appropriate staff in place. You're talking about hiring an individual that's probably going to be in the $80 to $120,000 range, and he's going to need an assistant. So right out of the chute, to try to bring that in-house, it's going to be more expensive than us partnering with an outside group. But even more importantly than that, it's the way we handle economic development, especially when we're talking about trying to recruit new businesses. A lot of times when companies are looking at a community to build in for the first time, they want to remain anonymous until they get pretty deep into the game. They want to do that for a number of reasons. One of them being that they don't want their competitors to know what they're up to. because of the nature of city government, I think it would be very difficult to bring a project in-house in City Hall and have it remain quiet and provide the opportunities for confidentiality that are oftentimes required by our customers because of open government and some of the issues and opportunities, what have you, that we have there. So for those two reasons, yeah, I think the partnership that we have with the North Iowa Corridor is important. I support it completely, and quite honestly, I think it's been working very well.
Is $100,000 enough, you think, a year?
Until somebody convinces me more needs to be spent, before I could be convinced, basically 100,000 is about what they asked for. Before I could be convinced that more is in order, somebody would have to show me what the increment would be used for. Show me, prove to me what we can do that we're not doing now with incremental money. We'd have to see how that would go. Nobody's made a play, as far as I'm concerned, for more money at this point in time. And with some of the budget constraints that we have, and that I'm certain we're going to have this next cycle, I think that would be a pretty difficult sell. Now, at the tail end of the question, you referenced the Chamber of Commerce, but I'm not sure that I heard anything about money or partnering. Can you explain to me exactly
Just
what you mean?
Cooperation with the Chamber on projects and working with the Chamber. Do you favor that continuing?
Absolutely. We have to remember that the Chamber of Commerce is the primary entity that represents the vast majority of businesses in Mason City. And by default, they represent a huge population of our citizens. And as the face for local business, which is exactly what the Chamber is, I think it behooves local leadership, both at the staff and at the council level, to seek every opportunity that we can to partner with the Chamber.
What do you think should be the working relationship between the mayor and the council and city administrator or city staff? What's the goal, and how are we doing?
I think the goal is exactly the way we have functioned the last 2 years. I think one of the things that people need to understand about the city council is we basically have two employees that we're responsible for. We're responsible for the city administrator, and we're responsible for the city attorney. And in this case, we've split the city attorney into two positions, so technically that would be three people. Those are the only three people that report directly to the city council. Every department head and every city employee that works for a department head basically reports to the city administrator. It is inappropriate, in my opinion, for city council persons to backdoor the city administrator and go to department heads or even city employees to try to seek change. We manage the city administrator, and if things aren't being done at the city level to the satisfaction of the citizens, then it's the role of the city council to manage the city administrator, nobody below him. The mayor's primary purpose is twofold. One, he's the figurehead for the community. He is the person that represents the community at public events or when we have new businesses that are being recruited to the town and so on. The second is to run a council meeting. For the most part, his charge in running a council meeting is to run it by rules established by the city council. In this case, when the mayor came on board, he saw a need for some different rules, if you will, to be put in place. And several of us gave him the latitude to try. And quite honestly, I think the changes that he's made have resulted in more efficient council meetings. And so to that end, I'm supportive of the changes that he's brought about. I think the mayor people also should remember that the mayor doesn't have a vote on policy. The mayor doesn't have a vote on the budget. He can be a champion, he can be a cheerleader. I think it's his role to work with council colleagues and try to find consensus, especially when we're divided. And he's done a pretty good job of that as well.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but does the mayor not have available the power to veto?
He does. And one thing that, and ironically, my wife and I were chatting about that last night over dinner after an article in the Globe Gazette yesterday. And what I'm not sure of, See, the council also has the authority to override a mayoral veto. And I'm not sure if that requires a simple majority or 4 votes, or if it requires a supermajority, which would be 5. But specific to the instances that were in the paper yesterday, it would be immaterial anyway, because those items happen to have council votes of 6. We were unanimous. So even if we had a mayor that wanted to veto specifically the items that were referenced yesterday, it wouldn't go anywhere, assuming that there were no council colleagues that changed their mind, because we'd turn around and override the mayoral veto. So you kind of got to know where the checks and balances are. There's a little bit more to it than saying, as mayor, I can veto. That also left a tone with me as a council person that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And of course, reading things in black and white, which is two-dimensional, is very different than having a conversation with somebody. But I think one of the things that I've heard from people in the community is they don't want a mayor that perceives himself as a dictator. And when you've got a council that's voted 6-0, and remember, the role of the council is to represent the community. So anytime, and I think we do that pretty well, anytime you've got a council vote that's 6-0, that's pretty huge, especially when you think back over the years, and we've had a lot of split votes and a lot of 4-2, a lot of 5-1. For us to be in consensus on items that are significant to the community is huge. And I think it would be a mistake for any one individual to think that he's going to come in and start overriding the overwhelming will of the council, which is, by default, the will of the community.
Thank you.
The council, as you well know, cut the human rights budget from $143,000 to $15,000. What's your opinion of that?
Well,
And is it working?
that's an area where in recent weeks the mayor has been unjustly accused by some of having been the instigator of that budget cut. And again, piggybacking on the words that I just shared, the mayor doesn't have a vote on the budget. He can advocate, he can be a cheerleader, but at the end of the day, he doesn't have a vote on the budget. It's the council. And in fact, it was not the mayor, but it was me that put the budget cut on the table. And to the extent that people may appreciate that, I accept that. To the extent that people may not appreciate that, I accept that as well. That's what elections are about. I think it's important to keep in mind that Mason City is a community of less than 30,000 people. That means by state law, we're not required to have a human rights commission, let alone a human rights department. There are very few cities in the state of Iowa that have human rights departments. Of those that do, Mason City at 15,000, the revised budget level, is still twice any other community in the state. So for those that want to argue that the budget cut was too drastic, I would argue that we still have a department that's funded at twice the level of any other department in the state of Iowa. I believe the comp would be Fort Dodge, but I've slept enough nights since we had the whole discussion that you might want to do a checkpoint on me on that. And let's take a look at what drove the cut. First of all, the city of Mason City was spending $140,000 to bring in $80,000 in federal money. We're basically running a department at somewhere around $220,000, $230,000. What are we getting for the money? I think it's important that for most of the time when we go for federal grants, our transit system would be a good example. The taxpayers are putting up somewhere around 10 to 20, maybe 25 cents on the dollar to bring in federal money. So we are very much the minority level of money. With respect to the Human Rights Department, we were a significant majority amount of the money. Okay, so you have to weigh that against the benefit to the taxpayers. The fact is, the people in Mason City are being taxed, were and are being taxed, to provide the same service at the state level. In many respects, one could argue that we were being double taxed. We were providing a redundant service. So, was the service that we were providing as a community worth that $140,000 or $220,000, $225,000, depending on how you want to look at it? Well, for the fiscal year ending in 2012, we closed 17 cases. So for roughly $250,000, we're processing 17 cases, and not all of those cases are Mason City citizens. That is to say, once you have a human rights department and you take federal money, you're required to take human rights cases from anywhere in the state. Again, that means the people that live inside the city limits of Mason City are providing a statewide service. I feel very strongly that if our taxpayers are being asked to provide a statewide service, it should be through state taxation, not through local taxation. Again, 17 cases. Every one of those can be handled by Des Moines with the state agency without any cost to the taxpayers. So until somebody shows me that it's not working, yes, I believe very strongly that it is. We're roughly 3 months into it now. I'm not aware of a single individual that has not been served. We still have the ability to serve each and every need. The difference is it's being handled by a group that's down in Des Moines rather than a group that's right here in Mason City. It's also important to note there was a lot of misinformation as we were working through this in the spring. People don't have to go to Des Moines. Des Moines will come to Mason City.
Anything else on that?
No.
Okay.
Looking ahead, if you're reelected, what are your top priorities, 2 or 3 things?
I have a website that I've put up for my campaign. It's www.scotttornquist.com. And I've noted 4, 5, 6 things there that are important to me. Now, again, I have to preface my comments with I'm only one of 6. And it takes 4 out of 6 to move anything forward. We're a team. The things that are important to me, and we'll have to see if they become important to the team, are continuing to grow our tax base. Again, we touched on that briefly a little bit earlier. The more we can grow our tax base, the more relief we provide to local taxpayers. I am very interested in the realignment of Highway 122 through town. I happened to be out of town yesterday morning, but the DOT was in town and had public hearings on that. I'll be interested to hear how that went. That is an initiative we've had in the pipeline since I was first elected.
That's just at the hearing stage right now?
Yes,
Okay.
but we've got a design on paper.
Okay.
The DOT brought a design to the table, and we were taking public comment on it. And even if things go smoothly, we're still several years away from execution because of the availability of state dollars. But I would like to see that through to completion. I'm very interested in having a viable community discussion on Highway 65 and the potential for bringing the one-ways back to two-way streets. We have some anecdotal information and some information in the comprehensive plan that would indicate that that would help retail business downtown, particularly on the east side of the split. I am very interested in seeing the biking and walking trails, that plan come to fruition, which is right now the plan is scheduled for December. But once we get the plan, I'm mostly interested in execution. I have been a person that has been an advocate for sidewalk and hiking, walking, biking trail changes since I was on planning and zoning for at least 10, 12 years. And we just haven't had the impetus to be able to move things forward. A lot of it is our cost models, but the Blue Zones initiative has created the opportunity for meaningful dialogue, and my hope is that from that dialogue we can bring about some meaningful change. Realistically, it's probably going to take us 5 to 10 years to execute the plan. We'll have to see how the plan looks, but that's going to be driven by the availability of financial resources. So we'll have to set priorities, and then we'll have to put together a plan that we can execute over time, and then we'll have to stick with it. We have a tendency, or we have had a tendency in the past to develop plans and then not do anything with them. I'd like to see us develop a plan and actually implement it. Those are some of the things that come to mind. I believe I've got each of those up on my website. I may have missed one or two, but those are the things that are top of mind for me at this point in time.
Seen anything further with the downtown? I mean, I think it's been a great success story. And you see any further development there, or just continuing as we are? Or?
The council is not aggressively looking for opportunities to develop and to spend community resources downtown. In fact, when we had our goal setting session last December, we agreed to a person that over the previous 3, 4, 5 years, the council had done everything we needed to do to put the downtown in a position to be successful. And with the conclusion of the Park Inn Hotel and the streetscape project and then the facade program that we put in place, we really felt like we had crossed the T's and dotted the I's. And we felt like it was time to pass the torch and let the Downtown Association and local business take the ball and run. Now, that does not mean that as opportunities come up, we're not going to be supportive of at least looking into them and letting them run their natural course. Case in point, the parking lot directly west of City Hall. That has tremendous potential. That is of the level of a multi-purpose facility discussion that we had several years ago. That was an initiative that we gave a good hard look at over the better part of a year and a half. It didn't pencil out from a public investment point of view. The beauty of this potential hotel development is it's privately driven. There won't be public dollars involved other than typical incentives that we would do with any other development, the 11 development agreements that we've put in place over the last several months. And at this point in time, we're very receptive and supportive of having this run its natural course. At the end of the day, it may be that nothing comes of the opportunity. But what we're trying to do right now is work hard to remove barriers that the developer might have to see if he can get his ducks in a row, get the financing that he needs, and put together a business plan that's mutually beneficial for him and the city of Mason City. If we can get to that point, this will be a huge project for Mason City in many respects. That's very exciting to think about. Even if it doesn't materialize, it's exciting to think that a hotelier, the quality of Hilton, has cast their sights on Mason City, Iowa, and they're interested in coming here. I venture to say that wouldn't have been the case a decade ago. We've come a long way, and it feels really good.
Scott, this is my final question, and I've made it my intent to ask every candidate this question. If I had never met you before, I'm living in your ward and you were knocking on my door, and I could only give you 30 seconds, why should I vote for you?
Because I truly care about Mason City. I have 20 years of proven experience in various capacities, donating my time, talent, and energy to try to make Mason City a better place for all of us. And the passion that I've had for the last 20 years continues to this day. I've never gained personally from one bit of it. It's all about trying to make this a better community.